Okay, so this is the last of our 6-part video series to explore the maximum street strategy. And arguably, this is the most important one yet as we dive into ways to maximize your returns. So there's no question that we're still in a housing crisis. Changes in government policy to allow more density creates an opportunity for you to generate wealth and create the desperately needed housing. So in this video, we're going to dive into the 6th letter in the wealth formula. So this is the letter H, which stands for highest return on your investment. So we'll discuss all of the things that you need to be aware of to capture the most bang for your buck. So let's dive right in. Welcome back. Thanks for watching. I'm Andy from Sweet Additions, where we help investors and homeowners create more housing and generate wealth. We would really appreciate if you can hit the like button and please subscribe to the channel so that we can get more content out. If you haven't seen our previous Max Suite strategy videos, we recommend that you check them out right after this video. Links are in the description below. Additionally, we're currently putting together a comprehensive in-person training program covering in detail the principles, strategies, and tactics as part of the Max Suite strategy. We'll share more info at the end of this video, and you can also check it out at sweetadditions.com/training. Okay, so the 6th letter in the wealth formula as part of the Max Suite strategy is the letter H, and it stands for highest return. Again, this is perhaps the most important aspect of this strategy. Although we're creating more housing units for our communities, it won't work if the numbers don't add up. And the better the numbers, the more sense the project makes. So in this video, we're going to share with you the strategies that we use to maximize the likelihood of success on each project. We're going to discuss analyzing a project using a pro forma, the acquisition and closing process, financing a project, budgeting, scheduling, filling a property, and much more, all of which will affect the bottom line of your projects. So without further ado, let's dive in. Okay, we're going to start with analyzing the numbers on a project before we even make an offer. Now, if you haven't already seen our 1st and 4th video on determining what can be built on your property, as well as ideal location, we recommend that you check those out. Links are in the description below. Now, once we've found the ideal property, it's time to dig into the numbers. We need to understand our closing costs, holding costs, construction, and renovation expenses. And based on that, determine a cash flow analysis. Our closing costs will depend on the percentage that we are putting down, legal fees, inspections, and appraisal costs, and of course, land transfer taxes. To determine our holding costs, we'll need to figure out the time period where we're not making any money from the property, but instead just feeding into it. Okay, so this is typically the period where we're performing renovations and construction, and we need to estimate this time period. So first, we need to determine our mortgage expenses, and that will of course depend on the size of the mortgage, the interest rate, and amortization period. Add to that what other items that we'll need to spend for that period of time, including utilities, insurance, property taxes, and potentially the cost of borrowing for your down payment, which for many people is the interest from a home equity line of credit. Next is the cost for renovations and constructions. And we do our best here to estimate our costs based on individual components of a project, but you can get a number based on a rough cost for the overall project. It's also important to add in a contingency fee of 10% for unknown issues that usually come up. Of course, this estimate is improved over time with more experience. Now, assuming we're holding our property, we would run our cash flow analysis with our mortgage costs after the initial holding period, during rentals, revised insurance premiums, cost of borrowing, property taxes, and allocate a certain percentage for vacancy, property management, and ongoing maintenance. This gives us our net operating expenses. Then we estimate our rental income from all of our units, which gives us our net operating income. We deduct the net operating expenses from the net operating income, which then gives us our cash flow. Now, if you intend to sell the property after renovations, try to get an accurate ARV, after repair value. There would be numerous selling costs such as agent fees, inspections, legal fees, and of course, a penalty for breaking your mortgage. Add this to all of your upfront expenses. Your potential sale price minus all of your expenses is your net profit. Your after repair value is also a good proxy for what you can obtain if you were to refinance a property, although your lender will typically go a little bit lower to be more conservative. So that covers the initial analysis in our example pro forma spreadsheet. Now, whether you plan to hold the property long-term, which we usually do, or whether you intend to sell the property, it's a good strategy to run through an analysis similar to this before even placing an offer on a property. This way, you're not going in blind and you know how much you can afford to pay. So next, let's talk about the acquisition and closing process. Many people say that you make the money on the purchase, which can be very true in many cases. Again, please watch our earlier videos on the Max 3 strategy on finding the ideal property. Now, when it comes to negotiating the deal, of course, we try to make it a win-win scenario with the seller. Often this can translate to a better deal. There's plenty of good free information and videos out there on how to negotiate the best deal from a seller. Now, we personally prefer older, well-maintained homes that are simply outdated but have updated systems and components. The best return for your investment dollars are for legal conversions to suites, curb appeal, and cosmetic improvements such as remodeled kitchens and baths, painting, flooring, and trim. Where possible, we try to get as long a closing as we are able to, sometimes 90 days or more if they're agreeable to it. This will allow us to get our ducks in a row, including the design and potentially permit documents completed, in addition to finding the right contractor. So this is great because we're not subject to any holding costs during the closing period, so the longer the better. Next, let's discuss financing the project and potential loans and grants. We know right now you're feeling the pain with interest rates. We all are, okay? Rates are much higher than they were a couple of years ago. Of course, we try our best to obtain a loan from an A lender first before we consider an alternate lender or a private lender. The interest rates, especially these days, can determine whether the project will be profitable or not. So take advantage of any possible loans and grants. Depending on whether or not you live on the property, you may be eligible for various green energy grants, incentives, and even interest-free loans. We actually have a video on this topic. Details are in the description below. Municipalities themselves may have loans and grants available, so make sure you check out what's available in your city or town. Take advantage of any development charge exemptions or deferrals. For example, the City of Toronto will allow you to defer a $25,000 development charge for a garden suite, and it's forgiven after a certain period of time as long as you don't try to sever that garden suite. Next, let's talk about controlling renovation and construction costs. There are a myriad of ways that this can be accomplished, and there's plenty of material out there to discuss how you can keep your costs within budget. We're going to mention a few things here. First, we only interview contractors who have experience with conversion projects. They'll know exactly what things cost and will be able to accurately quote your project. It's very risky to go with a lower price contractor who doesn't have the experience only to be upcharging you at a later date. We try to set a target date with our chosen contractor and agree to have a bonus payment for early completion or penalties for finishing late. After all, time is money, and any delays translates to longer vacancies and missing out on rental income. We don't focus on getting the cheapest materials. Although it may seem like we're saving money up front, but our goal is to hold the property long term, so we use materials that won't need replacement in a couple of years. Part of budgeting is stretching out our time horizon to determine actual costs over a period of time. So one example is that we have a tendency to spend more on luxury vinyl plank flooring because we know we're going to get 10 plus years, even though it's going to cost double the amount of laminate flooring, which can easily get damaged by water in a couple of years. Another example is that we spend more on Moen faucets because they have better warranties. Okay, so these are just a couple of examples. So we put all of our anticipated expenses on a budgeting spreadsheet. You can, of course, use the software. And of course, we don't forget to add a 10% contingency. Next is we make sure to put together a schedule with some buffer room, of course. So this ties into what we just said about putting together a timeline with your contractor. But your whole project, including the initial design, permitting, and rental process, once completed, should also be on your schedule. We use a simple spreadsheet Gantt chart, but of course, there's going to be much more fancy applications out there that can be used. The reason a schedule is important because, of course, the longer a project takes, the longer the vacancy, which translates into lost revenue. Now, once we have the renovation completed, and if our intent is to hold on to the property for a longer term, which makes sense for most people, it's time to rent out the house. Now, of course, if we're doing a conversion, we may already have a portion of the property rented out. It's very common to have, say, the main unit of the home rented out first before beginning the renovation for a second, third, or even fourth unit. You can leave the entire property vacant until everything is fully completed, but you could be leaving money on the table. So for example, if it takes you a year to complete a basement suite and a garden suite, you are foregoing rents out of the main unit of the home, and that could translate to tens of thousands of dollars in lost rent. If we do decide to rent out one of the units while the house is being renovated, we certainly must inform the tenant that there will be work and perhaps make it clear to them in an agreement. And we need to do the best we can to minimize noise, disruption, and construction dust to their units. Of course, this can't always be controlled, but we try our best. Now, when renting out your unit, don't rush things. Take the time to find the right tenant. You don't want to fill it out of desperation and then have to deal with the wrong person down the road. More and more, we're finding people using more creative strategies to avoid finding that long-term tenant from hell. We'll discuss that in a future video. For now, we focus on good people with good income and good jobs. And if your property is done nicely, these are the people that you will attract to your units. Okay, finally, let's talk about the refinance. We want to mention that a Max Suite project works really well with the BRRRR strategy, which stands for buy, renovate, rent, refinance, and repeat. If we add a ton of value to the property, we may be able to refinance a lot of that money out and reinvest that onto another property. So the goal is to refinance out at least the amount that we spent on the renovation work. Once in a blue moon, we're even able to refinance out the initial down payment as well. So this is what we call a sweet unicorn. Now, in this case, the cash flow left is not great, but at least we got out a chunk of money for other opportunities. It's also great if you want to take a phased approach to a project that involves a larger scope of work. So for example, in a recent project, we purchased a move-in ready main floor bungalow, rented that out, and renovated the basement. Once the basement was completed, we leased that out as well and refinanced to obtain the funds to build the detached garden suite. You can see that the Max Suite projects work very well for BRRRR projects because these properties are so versatile. Okay, so this completes our discussion of the letter H for the highest return as part of the wealth formula of the Max Suite strategy, and also as the final video on our 6-part series. Thank you for sticking to the end. Again, we're putting together an in-person comprehensive training program on implementing the Max Suite strategy, and the training will be packed full of practical, detailed information, and the wealth formula will be front and center as part of this training. Now, if you're interested, please go to suiteadditions.com/training to apply, and we'll give you more details about the upcoming training. In the meantime, remember to focus on all the little things to boost the highest return for your property. Also, let us know what you think. Did we miss any important details? Please share them in the comments below. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you in the next video. To learn more about the Max Suite strategy, download our free guides at suiteadditions.com and get started. And if you enjoyed this video, here's another great one for you.